So I've put up here, this is kind of a review from last week. We did this a couple of times last week. If I have 8.427 inches and I want to convert it to the nearest 16th of an inch. Now we can convert it into an exact fraction, but that's not what we want here. A lot of applications, construction, design, even a lot of crafts, you're going to be measuring with a ruler that goes to quarters, eighths, sixteenths of an inch. So how do we make it to that nearest specific fraction rather than the exact fraction equivalent? Well, I'm going to start with this one down here. 0.81, I'm going to turn it into a fraction by simply putting it over 1. We can turn anything into a fraction by just putting it over 1. It's the simplest way to do it. But right now, it has a denominator of 1. We want it to have a denominator of 16. How do I turn a 1 into a 16? Times 16. We'll make that 16. But in a fraction, if I multiply the bottom, but multiply the denominator by something, I also have to do the same to the top. Multiply the numerator by the same thing. So 0.81 times 16 is, what's that? 12.96. Yes, Ed.
Why wouldn't we do it over the hundreds like we?
Because we don't want to go to the exact fraction here. We don't want 81 hundredths. We want it to the nearest specific numerator. 81 hundredths would stay 81 hundredths. There's nothing that those two can divide down by. So we want to try to get it to 16ths. It's a lot easier to convert a 1 into a 16 than it is to convert 100 into a 16. But that is a very good question, because normally if I'm giving you a decimal and I'm asking you to convert it into a fraction, we want 81 hundredths and reduce it if you can. So how do I know the difference? Well, here I asked you to convert to the nearest, and I gave you a specific fraction. So that's where you want to start out with it over 1 and multiply it out. Okay. The instruction, if I wanted it to be 81 over 100th, I would say convert to an exact fraction. The exact fraction here, that would be 81 hundredths, 81 over 100. And that cannot be reduced. Good question, though. Up here now I have the 12.96 over 16. What that is telling me is that this is between 12 sixteenths and 13 sixteenths. Which one is it closer to? The 13. 12.9 is closer to 13. It's bigger than 12.5. So, to the nearest 16th, 0.81 inches is 13 sixteenths of an inch. Pretty much, yeah. Because you're going to have to measure this out with a ruler. On your ruler, you don't have a 0.81 anywhere, but you can find the 13 sixteenths. So the 8.427, now just like any other converting decimal to a fraction or mixed number, the part in front of the decimal point, the 8, is just going to stay a whole number. That's 8. It's the part after the decimal point, 0.427. And since we're going to a specific denominator again, the 16th, we're going to leave that as 0.427 and just put it over 1. Now, what do we want that denominator to become? 16. So how do we turn that into 16? Times 16. And of course, we must also multiply the top by 16. So 0.427 times 16 is 6.832. Good. And now that is telling us that this is between 6 sixteenths and 7 sixteenths. Which is it closer to? 7 sixteenths. So are we done? What did we forget? We got the 8. It's 7, or 8 and 7 sixteenths inches. I'm sensing the need for another example or two of that. Let's do 0.866 inches to the nearest eighth inch. Tell me where to start. So how do I do that? 0.866 over 1. Very good. Then what? Okay, this time I want the denominator to be 8. So I'm going to multiply my 1 by 8 to turn it into a denominator of 8. And whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 0.866 times 8 is 6.928. Thank you. And of course that is between 6/8 and 7/8. It's going to be closer to the 7/8. So this is 7/8 of an inch. I think you're ready to try one on your own here. Let's do 0.289 inches to the nearest 1/8 inch. So where do I start? Make it a fraction. How do I do that? 0.289 over 1. Then what? Okay, so we get what over 8? 2.312 over 8. Okay, so that is between 2/8 and 3/8. Which one's it closer to? 2/8. Okay, that's a good question. Do I reduce that to 1/4? Well, didn't I ask for it to the nearest 1/8 inch?
Yeah.
Is 1/4 an 1/8 inch?
No.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is.
It's just in a reduced form. It's a simplified form.
Oh. You have it both ways, so it doesn't matter?
Yeah, 2/8 would be fine. I wouldn't mark that wrong if I was asking for that. But I mean, 1/4 is still to the nearest 1/8 inch. It's just in a simplified or reduced form.
So in my math lab, it would reduce.
It would ask you to reduce it or not. It'll give you specific instructions on that. Can't wait. That's that excitement we like to see. I feel very appreciated after I leave this class. If I ask you to evaluate 2.1 m minus 4.3 p for m equals 7.9 and p equal to 3.3, what am I going to do? I'm going to replace m with 7.9. So this is going to become 2.1 times 2.1 m means 2.1 times m. So 2.1 times 7.9. Then what?
And then 4.3
Okay, minus 4.3 times
3.3.
that p is going to become 3.3. Now what do we do? Order of operations says multiply first. So I'm going to do 2.1 times 7.9, which is 16 point what? 59. Okay. Minus 4.3 times 3.3. Then what do I do? 4.3 times 3.3 is 14.19. Now we can subtract. 16.59 minus 14.19, which is 2.4. So now back to the original question of Bell's from a while. Is that 2.4 or 2.40? 2.4 is fine. My math lab may ask you to round a certain number of digits again. If it says round to the nearest hundredth, put in the 0. Since we don't know what these numbers mean, it would be kind of presumptuous to put the 0 on the end of it unless we're told to. So I'm going to have you guys try one in your notes. Evaluate r times, in parentheses, 3.6n plus d squared, close the parentheses, minus 4.1q, for r equals 1.8, n equals 2.3, d equals 2.1, and q equals 1.4. So I'll give you a couple minutes to try that, and then we'll go through it. Okay, let's take a peek. First step, of course, is just to get everything substituted in correctly. So this is going to become, r will become 1.8, parentheses, 3.6 times 2.3 plus 2.1 squared, close parentheses, minus 4.1 times 1.4. Good. What do we have to do first? Parentheses. We're going to start out inside this yellow box, inside the parentheses. In there, what do we have to do first? The squared. 2.1 squared is 4.41. Then what? 3.6 times 2.3 gives 8.28. And then so 8.28 plus 4.41 is 12.69. Now, since I've reduced what's inside the parentheses to a single number, we don't need the parentheses anymore. But as I bring down the rest of information, what do I have to remember to put in here? It's times. The 1.8 was in front of the parentheses with no operation. That means times. And everything else just comes down. What do we do next? Perfect. 1.8 times 12.69, which is 22.842 minus 4.1 times 1.4. Next, 4.1 times 1.4, which is 5.74. So now we've got 22.842 minus 5.74, which is 17.102. How many of you got 17.102? Okay. So we got a pretty good average on that one. Our next step, notice the instruction is not evaluate, it is solve. Remember, evaluate meant give a value to, put the numbers in and just reduce it down to what it can be. Solve means we're going to find a variable equals a value. We're going to find what the value of one of those letters is. So let's take 4.2x minus 8.4 equals 2.1. Now, just like with the fractions, this looks scary, but it's really just another one of our simple equations. If you think back, we had equations like 3x minus 7 equals 20. How did we solve this equation here? Add 7 to both sides. 3x equals 27. And then divide by 3. X equals 9. This is the exact same form of an equation. Just the decimals make it look ugly. What are we going to do first to solve this equation? Add 8.4. So that's gone. Add 8.4 here gives us 10.5. All that's left on the other side is the 4.2x. Now what? Divide by 4.2. So x equals 2.5. That's not so bad. Try this one. Try that. What's my first step? Subtract 3.1. So that's gone. Over here we have 20.3, and over here we're left with 5.8x. Then what? Divide by 5.8. So that's gone, leaving us with just x. 20.3 divided by 5.8. 3.5. What do you think? Not so bad?
It's easy, it's really hard.
It's really hard.
It's really hard. Yeah, it's giving me a headache.
They've learned that when they say it's easy, we get more difficult.
You see that, it's not working on you, and they say it's really hard.
Well, the first step in becoming a math teacher is they remove the heart.
It's the same for English teachers.
Okay,
You place dollar one English teachers also.
sure.
Yeah.
So let's look at this one. What's our first step? We have an x on each side, so we have to get rid of one. We'll get rid of the smallest one, which is 3.7x. So that's gone. What else do we have to do, though? Subtract it from the other side, which leaves us with 1.4x. Okay, what else is still left here? The minus 2.4 equals, on the other side it is 3.4. Perfect. We have to add 2.4 to get rid of this. Adding it over here gives us 5. I'm sensing I need to slow down for a second here. Everybody caught up? No? Don't like it? Okay. Well, my next step, I'm going to divide by 1.4. So x equals, what, 4.28571429 approximately? Okay. 4, 3, oh, your calculator rounded off a digit earlier.
5.8 divided by 1.1 is 4.142.
1, 4? Gotcha.
That's what I got.
Okay, 1, 4,
2.8,
5, 7, 1, 4, 3. Okay. Does that look better?
Well, that was
Now, my math lab would tell you to round that off to the nearest hundredth or thousandth. Let's say it's telling you thousandth. What are we going to round to? What?
1.143.
Perfect. The digit in the thousandths place is the 2. What's the next one? The 8. The 8's telling us to move it up. Perfect. It's bigger than 5. So it's 4.14, and the 2 becomes a 3. I'm going to show you a little trick here, though. I don't like approximate answers. This is obviously an approximate answer. I had to round the decimal point. 5.8 divided by 1.4, or 5.8 divided by 1.4. We can just move the decimal point. Make this 58 divided by 14. And treat this just like any other improper fraction. 14 goes into 58 4 times. 4 times 14 is 56. There are 2 left over. So 4 and 2/14, or 4 and 1/7.
Whoa. How would you like it on the test?
I would accept it either way on the test. My math lab will specifically tell you round to the nearest hundredth or thousandth, or express as an exact fraction.
Okay.
If it says exact fraction or give the exact answer, it is looking for the fraction.
So reduced.
Reduced, yes.
Gotcha.
Maybe one more of those?
Sure, maybe, yeah.
Maybe? Okay.
Happy camper.
Good. So let's do this one. Tell me where to start. Okay, we've got an x on each side of my equal sign, so I've got to get rid of one of them. We'll get rid of the small one, which is 3.1x. So that's gone. Where else do I have to take it from? The 5.2. Good. So that leaves me with 2.1x. Over here, I still have 7.4. And over here, I have minus 0.3. Then what?
We need to get rid of that x again, right?
Well, we've got to get x by itself. So we have to add the 0.3. Perfect. So 7.7 equals 2.1x. And then divided by 2.1. So x equals 6.666. Repeating? Okay. 8 6. Well, that's just because your calculator rounded off at that point. Rounded the 6, rounded it up to a 7. Of course, what if my math lab said the nearest hundredth? 3.67. Good. What if my math lab said exact answer? 7.7 over 2.1 is going to become 77 over 21. 77 divided by 21. 21 does go in there 3 times. That'd be 63 with 14 left over. That's 14 21st. And yes, both of those, 14 and 21, can be divided by 7. So that becomes 2 over 3. Can't forget the 3 for the whole number. 3 and 2/3. Many of you may have recognized once you saw the 6 repeating that that was going to be 2/3.
Sure, didn't you get that one?
There you go. Okay, so it's time to turn it over to Bonnie here. There is a new quiz that's going to be due tomorrow. That is Friday at 11:59 p.m. There's a new homework that's going to be due for next Tuesday. Start of class. Any questions?